Stella, thank you so much for joining me. I've wanted to talk to you for so long about this because it's been a subject that seems to be coming up a lot with my daughters. My daughter, when she first went to senior school, came home saying, this girl's bi, this girl's pan, and I was really confused because she was 12. So I
Yeah,
think things are very different now from when I was a teenager. What's happening?
they certainly are. There's been an extraordinary change in the last, I suppose, about 10 years. And suddenly kids are coming home at 11 and 12 saying, I'm pan or I'm gender fluid and things like that. And parents are blinking, kind of going, "Oh, fine." You know what I mean? Because most of us these days are pretty liberal. Certainly parents generally love their children more than anybody else and are more committed to them. And so we've mostly got with the program and understand that you don't shame anybody and that there's a developmental kind of stage that happens between roughly 10 and 20 where a child goes from being a non-sexual person to being a sexual person. And it's a little bit awkward for everybody because a sexual awakening is happening in the house, and especially obviously for the child. So that's happening. And we are, maybe for the first generation, or certainly fairly recently, we're accustomed to the fact that lots of these teenagers will be gay or lesbian or bisexual. So that's all. We're ready for all of that. And then in like a rocket has come gender identity, where everybody's like, well, this is new. I don't know anything about this.
What
I
is
was ready
it? I
for the
mean,
gay lesbian thing, but
yes.
what's this? So
Yes.
it's
And
a, it's
what is
a
that? What is that? For people who are not
fascinating.
familiar with it, what does this mean? Gender identity.
Well, I think it's new, so we don't really there's so much theory, and people like myself are working in the field, so there's some kind of very kind of definite professional anecdotes, but there's very little evidence. There's very, very little long-term research that we can actually say this is what's going on and this is how this is likely to play out. And anybody who's saying that is frankly a snake oil salesman. There isn't a strong body of evidence that gives us any ability to talk confidently. What we can do, though, when we're parents and when we're psychotherapists, one, parents can approach things with love and gentleness, and
Always.
psychotherapists can approach things with curiosity and compassion. And between that, it should be okay, if you follow me. That's enough
Mm.
to carry anything. And if you think about it, lots of other new kind of psychological phenomena have happened in other eras. You know what I mean? Like if you think about it, when people first considered the concept of the teenager, this was a new concept. Parents didn't know what to do. That didn't go so well. And then there was different mental health conditions that arrived that nobody knew what to do when they first arrived. Anorexia first arrived, 60s, 70s. Nobody knew what to do. They were like, what? People are okay, starving themselves. Then bulimia came. Nobody knew what to do. It was people are vomiting in the 80s. It was a huge contagion that happened, and contagions are very extraordinary phenomena that happens in psychology where they happen in lots of different ways. And once they arrive, they're very serious. Like suicide is probably the most serious socially contagious issue. So it's something that you have to take very, very seriously. Then self-harming arrived. Nobody knew it. They didn't see it coming. It was very strange when you first heard about it. Now we're all used to it, self-harming. So I'm not equating. These aren't similar. There aren't similarities between anorexia and self-harm. They're very different experientially. However, they're a new thing that arrived that parents just went, I do not know what to do with this. It's new and it's very difficult to understand. And nowadays, arguably, the new concept of gender identity has come in. And it's not just gender identity. Maybe I feel like a boy or I am a boy. It's actually things like neopronouns and new identities like I am gender fluid, I'm pangender. These are words that, if I had said this 10 years ago, you would have said, what are you talking about? So
Mm.
for starters, I think parents need to be very self-forgiving for not knowing. How would you know? How would you know what's in the middle of the teenage zeitgeist? You know what I
Yes.
mean? No
Yes.
more than we knew what was going on in the late 80s with goths and emos and even the noughties. You know what I mean? So these things come and go. They often begin in the teenage population. And I think our job is to just support a process of exploration so that some of these things might stay. Some of these things might be identities that are very, very empowering and liberating for people. And so long as they are, I'm thrilled, if you follow me. But I think all that psychotherapists can do is make sure that we approach it with curiosity, like I said earlier, and parents with love. Love and compassion generally
So
will carry you.
as a parent, if your child comes home and says, I want to be referred to by these pronouns, or I'm I'm something different from what the parent originally thought they were. How would are you saying that, because there's this model of complete affirmation, you just basically, you don't challenge them, you say, of course, and then you follow through with that. Where do you sit on that?
Well, there's kind of two kind of beliefs. This is a controversial field, and anybody who speaks up can be kind of misrepresented quite easily. But there's two basic beliefs, and the more parents or anybody who's listening engage and think, well, where do I stand on these beliefs, or I'll think about it, the clearer your own mind will be. So effectively, one camp, for want of a better word, would believe in the concept of trans is like an inner identity. It's almost like a soul. It's within you. Nobody else can describe it. It is completely subjective to you, so it's unfalsifiable. Very like, my mother is obviously, I'm born a Catholic, and she tells me I have a Catholic soul, and I say I don't think I do, and she says, but you do. And we jog along. We can handle it. You know what I mean? We do, agree to disagree, and we roll on past the salt. It's fine. And so that's the concept. Some people truly believe there's such thing as a gender identity within you, and that could be transgender identity, or it could be just a cisgender. So that's some people's beliefs. My own belief, and many people, and let's say the other therapists who wrote the book with me, Lisa Marciano and Sasha, I add, we believe in a more developmental understanding of gender distress, where some people, maybe during a stage of development, or maybe for other factors such as biopsychosocial, I hate to put in all the jargon, but it could be a social reason, it could be a psychological reason, it could even have some biological roots. We don't know. It's still open. But we do know that some people seem to get very, very distressed at a certain stage, and there's certain commonalities with these children. For example, the numbers of the children seeking medical transition in GIDS at the Tavistock in London, depending on the study, some of them were as high as 48% had autism. So there's high links with other issues, such as rigid thinking, like OCD, autism, anxiety, a very kind of very definitive black and white outlook can make you very attracted towards seeking a new identity, because you can feel, I don't feel like a girl. I don't think I'm good looking to be a girl. I don't even fancy other boys like I'm supposedly meant to. I must be trans. And so that's that can be an understandable issue. If somebody has that issue, it's not about having a gender identity within you. It's to do with the fact that they're kind of rejecting themselves, maybe because they hate their body, maybe because they're really anxious and lonely and they're looking for a community, maybe because they don't like the roles that are imposed upon them from society, that they're meant to be pretty, they're meant to have long hair, maybe they're meant to have a boyfriend when they don't want a boyfriend. And so there's high numbers of children who are gender non-conforming, who it's about 70-80%, who later become gay, lesbian, or bisexual. So when you have issues like that, you think, well, is it because she is a butch lesbian who doesn't quite know she is, or doesn't want to be a butch lesbian, but this is what she seems to be? Maybe she'd prefer to be a straight boy rather than a butch lesbian. Yeah, it's really complex.
Yes,
It's fascinating, but incredibly complex.
it's also what that says to me, because I've noticed, for example, Lego. When I was a kid, Lego was all sorts of colors. And then I started to notice Lego in the shops became pink. And, and things became much more sort of gender segmented.
It's so
I think it's become, yeah.
Yeah, we do that. We explore that in the book. What did he when kids say they're trans? And in the book, we talk about how in the 80s, honestly, Lego and children's clothes, babies' rooms. They were really cute, but they were not blue or pink. They were white or lemon or green. You know what I mean? There was lots of different colours people used, but they didn't divide the children into the pink and the blue. And then frankly, it was a consumer decision, a consumer related decision. You know, shiny suits and shiny offices in the 90s realized if we have pink Lego and blue Lego, we'll sell more. If we have a pink birthday cake
Absolutely.
and a blue birthday cake, if we have pink baby grows and blue baby grows, we will sell more. And they did. And honestly, I think, I don't have numbers on this, but I'd say roughly 80% of kids are fine with it. Another section could live without being told that they're brave and boyish and adventurous and girls are pretty and feminine, but they'll roll. And then there's a small section who hate it, who are like,
Yes.
I'm brave and adventurous and I don't want pink and I don't want to be pretty and I don't want to talk about fairies. I want to climb trees. And it really sits badly on them. And it was funny because, you know, journalists commented on the arrival of the pink and blue in the 90s, but nobody really ascertained what will be the impact. And an amazing little kind of anecdote is in 2008, Time magazine, they reported on the first well-known, the first famous gender reveal party, where the mother was in New York, of course. The mother got all her friends together. They had a cake, and when they opened the cake, out came, you know, the pink insides because it was a girl, and it was revealed with a pink balloon that it was a girl. Now think of the pink, pink, pink. And that child has since come out as non-binary. And yeah,
No.
isn't that
Oh,
very
that's so
interesting?
interesting.
Yeah. So I think if you impose pink and blue, this is one of the many, many theories that are out there, and there really are many. If you keep on imposing it, there's a certain section who'll just push back and say, stop, stop. Because some people are very naturally feminine and some aren't. I know as a child, I had an awful lot of distress about being a girl. It lasted for many years. I would have wilted had I been forced into that pink thing. I never wore dresses. I had a really, really hard time. I don't know what would have happened, but it would have been really awful for me. And so
Yes.
that continues on to the teenage years. I gave a talk in a school recently, and it was an all-girls school. And I looked around, there was about 100 of them, and I said, does anybody here have short hair? And they didn't. Every single girl had long hair. Every
It's
single.
so true. Stella, that's because it's so funny because my daughter even talked about that and she said, I'm growing my hair because it's a status symbol for girls.
Yeah.
It's you've just got to have the long hair. And both my girls used to have cropped hair when they were kids because I didn't want to have to keep washing it and it kept falling in their food. But
That's
you
cute.
know, that became yeah, it's cute. And my it's interesting because my bonus daughter, who's now 25, so she was born, I think, she was in the 90s. She said to me that when she was a teenager, I mean, I remember it because I was with her when she was little. She went through a very, very hard phase of I'm a boy,
Mhm.
really insistent she was a boy, and she looks on with horror now, saying, "I think if I was living now, I would insist on transitioning."
Yeah.
And she's a very feminine girl now, woman. She's
Yeah.
very happy.
So interesting. And
So
can I just add that it seems like it's liberating to say, oh, I'm not gender conforming, I'm trans, I'm going to take medication and I'm going to look different. Arguably, it's more liberating to say, I'm not gender conforming. I'm going to cut my hair. I'm going to act like a boy if I want to. I'm going to open my legs when I'm sitting down and then nobody's going to comment about it. You know what I mean? I'm going to live in a society
mm,
which doesn't make me
yes,
medicalize my identity just because I don't feel like being a very pretty feminine girl.
fascinating. Yes, I completely agree with that. I think so. As parents, how do we, given that they're living in a society where that to an extent is being pushed on them, that they're still, it's strange, isn't it? Because we talk a lot about feminism and we talk a lot
Yeah,
about, men being able to, talk about your feelings, and there's a bit of a
no.
crisis in masculinity. But I think that it feels confining.
It does. And when you study it, and we do in the book, you realize that we've got this obsession these days with labeling, sound bites and labeling and categories. And so no sooner do you cut your hair and people are saying, is this a gender statement rather than,
Yes.
and you know what I mean?
Yes.
And so I do think it is quite confining for all the talk. It feels quite regressive that girls and boys are so heavily gendered into pink and blue in various different ways in a way that just didn't happen 40 years ago. And I don't think that has been good for children. I think it would be better if girls could be brave and adventurous and without being labelled, and boys could be pretty and feminine and flouncy with the little princess dress without anybody thinking that they need to change their name, change their pronouns, change their way of being. So I think it's more aggressive. On first glance, you could think this is progressive. I would argue it's regressive to medicate when somebody just wants to just effectively present in a different way. But the question you asked, which is very important, and it's why we wrote our book, is to help parents. Because parents are dealing with this. Like I said earlier, new issues arrive all the time. There's going to be something else me and you haven't even conceived of in 20 years. And
Please no.
Yeah. And this is a new issue, and it's arriving fast. And parents are often feeling like they are, pedaling on their bike, trying to catch up while the child is on a train and left the station. Like, the children are far ahead. They're using all these acronyms and jargon, and we give a list at the end of the book of the jargon so that you will know
really helpful.
your words. You need to know your language. It's a world where people can be incredibly sensitive to the language you use. We believe if a parent does have a child who comes home saying, I need to transition, I need to change my name, I need to change my pronouns, I think we should wait. We have this acronym, we use one ourselves, which is, why am I talking? Wait. So first of all, our job is to listen and ask curious questions, open questions, not accusatory, not, well, what the hell is this? You were a lesbian last week and now you're trans. What's going on? That's not the approach we recommend. It would be more like, could you tell me, where this happened in the beginning, when you first started talking about it? Who are you watching online? Who are your favorite social media influencers? What's your favorite sites? Most of us have an arc when we go online. I might go over to Mumsnet, flick onto WhatsApp, over to Twitter, back over to Facebook, and then back to Mumsnet. Most of us have a little, you know what I mean? I'm sure you have one.
Yes, absolutely.
And I'd like parents to ask their kids, what's your arc? It'll be very different.
Fascinating.
That can elucidate a lot of information. And who are their favorite influencers? That can give you. And tell me the person you most identify with, so I can get to know that person, so I can kind of get to know where you're at. Because I am at sea. I am utterly, utterly at sea. This is new to me. So I'm going to find out about it. And all I ask of you is to have some patience with me, because right now you know way more than me. And that upsets the natural order, because parents generally guide their children. And so my job is not only to catch up with your knowledge, it's to far surpass it. But you're going to have to give me a little bit of time, because this is new. And then after you've done that, you do have to give quite a lot of time. And it is difficult, but most of us will do anything for our children, and it's worth it, because it means you get to understand the world your kid is living in. Rather than making decisions and allowing your child to rule and make, they often talk about child-centered, and we're very into child-centered as an approach. But child-led is a whole different approach, which I would argue puts a burden of responsibility and decision-making on children's shoulders. And I don't think that's very healthy for
I agree.
them.
Yes.
Yeah.
We have to be careful what we give our children decisions over, because are they ready yet to actually make those decisions? Are they competent?
Yeah. On that subject, I was, because of a weird mix of circumstances, I was allowed to choose my secondary school, and always regretted it, and always thought it was, and it was my decision.
Right.
It's just a random little thing, but it was my decision as such. Always regretted it, never liked it, always thought I had made the decision. To this day, I think I made the decision. I was 12. What the hell,
Yes. Such a great point.
Yeah, children shouldn't feel like it's their decision. It's the adult's decision. And if they allow the child to make the decision, arguably, it'll weigh heavily. It'll weigh heavily on them. I think we should free them from making decisions. And so our job is to catch up, surpass them in the knowledge, and then make some decisions around it.
So the ways to do that, there's this book, which actually I Brilliant. I love it.
Thank you.
And also, one of the reasons I came to you was because you have Gender Wider Lens, which is another podcast, and all our people listen to podcasts. So that's a
Yay.
really, really good way of exploring this entire topic. Love it. I love what you covered there. And I love
It's a labor of love. We love it. Our podcast is really, the book is the podcast is the book. Like
right.
they're very,
I
yeah,
see.
yeah,
Right. Yes.
yeah,
So that really helps because you're interviewing a lot of different people about
yeah.
what's going on, and it's a good in because one of the reasons I even ended up down this route because I don't have I've got experience of homosexuality. I've got so many friends who are homosexual because of the industry I was in and because I just love them because they see the world in such an interesting way.
Nice.
I don't have any trans friends. I've met trans people and never had any issues. But I came to this because I found that my daughters were coming home saying that they felt uncomfortable about talking about being a girl and
Oh,
what that meant.
yeah,
And that then led me into trying to understand what's actually been going on and what's going on in the schools as well.
yeah,
Because I think one of the problems is sometimes we might find out about this a bit late because then they might tell someone in the school, and we can be on the back foot. So
yeah.
how do we manage, would you call in a therapist? At what stage would you call in a
Well,
therapist?
there's
And
two
you are a
things.
therapist.
Yeah,
Stella's a
I am a
therapist.
therapist.
Yeah.
There's two things. One is what's going on in the schools. Some schools are being quite authoritarian and choosing to navigate the students, for example, gender identity, without informing the parents. And we explore this in the book, and we offer advice, and we offer kind of just different options a parent can take if that happens. So, for example, many parents we've worked with, they didn't hear about anything to do with the child's gender issues until they got a report card and it was addressed to Charlie, not Charlotte. Now, this is happening. Yeah, and this is happening
Wow.
way more often than people. They think it's their own crazy school, but it's not. This is common. And it's a bid to please the child. And so it might be he, him, Charlie, and they're going. I remember one parent saying, and I rang up the school saying, I've got the wrong report. And they said, oh, no, you don't. No. I'm like,
That would upset me so much.
it's very disempowering for the parent. It's very, and so we center, this is primarily a parent book, and we center the parents' kind of role in their children's lives. And so while we do think that you should, I'm a psychotherapist, I'm pro therapy, but we do think you should use a therapist if this is what you think is required. Don't maybe jump there first. Don't disempower yourself. Make sure that you center yourself in all decisions for your family. Make sure that you read around it and decide whether you can maybe help. Sometimes bringing in the therapist can triangulate the situation. So when a triangulation occurs, there's a victim, which is arguably the child. There's a persecutor, which is arguably the parent, and there's a savior, which is the therapist. That's not healthy. It's not good for anybody to be either victim, persecutor, or savior. So we kind of say, yeah, fine, go to a therapist if this is what's needed. Could you make sure you try yourself, first of all, to connect with your child?
Interesting. Yes.
Don't disempower yourself, and don't presume. We've got this world where we just bring in the professionals. On top of that, we have a world where we're terrified of our children's distress, rather than realizing not only does a child become a sexual being between 10 and 20, they complexify their understanding between 10 and 20, and they realize that life is very hard and it's not fair, and this is a very bitter pill, and an awful lot of children kind of believe that everybody else is living this golden life with golden
Yes,
friends.
for sure, for
Yeah.
sure. And
And they
Instagram
think
just
something's
means
wrong with
that, all the TikTok.
Yeah.
Yes.
So they think something's wrong with them. So when they feel uneasy, sending them to the professionals is buying into the idea that most of our default setting is happiness, when honestly, the lucky few have the gift of happiness. Most of us rock along up and down, a little bit worried about this, a little bit worried about that, enjoying a cup of tea and thinking this was you lovely, then going into a little bit of a fret. That's the usual. That's the human condition. And
Yes.
so I'm very worried about how many teenagers come to me who think if they're not pretty much happy most of the time, something is wrong and needs to be fixed, rather than understanding that is life.
Right. I love that. Yes. And if they feel so just to sort of round it up, obviously read this book.
Yeah.
There are other books. I know that this is, I think, the only book that really talks about how as a parent you go about pushing back, or not pushing back, what's the word for it, sort of just
Well, exploring
giving.
it on a deeper level. Our podcast is gender a wider lens, and I think was well named, if you follow me. And the book is when kids say they're trans, as in, yeah, yeah, sure, but make sure that you know your child deeply. Don't take things at face
Mm,
value, because honestly, we all say a lot of things. And so, for example, for myself, I know we're winding up, but like with me, a client would often come in saying, I need to leave my husband. And 6 weeks later, they're talking about their alcoholism. That's common. So
okay,
presuming just on face value, this is what's going on, arguably undermines what is actually happening for
there
the
might be other things
yeah.
underneath it that you could find by digging.
Yeah. Make sure you don't
Yes,
miss it by
yes,
being a little bit superficial about it.
yes. Okay, that's brilliant. I love that advice. Is there anything else that you would love to be able to say to parents who either have kids who, because some of them might have children who are bi, homosexual, and then people come out as trans. They're not necessarily in the same camp,
Yeah.
even.
I think people conflate, that's what I'd like to say. People conflate the experience of being gay as the experience of being trans. And so, do you remember I said earlier there's two beliefs? One is there's an inner trans in you, and the other is more people develop distress, and some people transition because they develop distress around their gender presentation. I think I would love if parents realize being gay or lesbian or bisexual is a kind of an inner drive that seems to be kind of either you're born with or you develop in infancy, and it's empirical. You can test it, and it's your relationship with other people, and it's almost instinctive, if you follow me. While a gender identity is completely in your mind, and so it's a
It's
very,
interesting.
very different experience. You're not born with it. I can't, there's no evidence. There's nothing in the research. It will show you that some people are more feminine and some people are more masculine, but you're not born. There's nothing in you, and it's not testable. So it's a very, very different experience. And obviously, it needs a lifetime of medication should you wish to medically transition. So it's a very different experience. And conflating those two experiences just because it's LGBT doesn't mean they're all the same. For example,
Fascinating.
being
Yeah.
lesbian is very different than being gay. But
Yes.
anyway, being trans is specifically really, really different than being gay, lesbian, or bisexual.
Yes. Brilliant. Okay. So for anyone who's found this discussion really interesting, please buy the book. I'll put a link to it in the podcast notes, as well as a link to Gender a Wider Lens
Thank
for
you.
Stella.
It
Thank
was
you
lovely
so much
talking
for
to you.
joining us. What a joy.
I enjoyed it.
Thank you. Stella, could you not, what you need to do is leave the computer on just for a bit so it uploads. So I'm going to finish how do I enter the session? I end